Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Positively Connected in Dogs. Today, we have a very special guest, friend, and mentor of mine, Vicki Ronchette with Show Dog Prep School. Thank you so much for being here, Vicki.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about something that is actually how I first met Vicki. I got my first conformation show dog and needed a little extra assistance and guidance. And I'm so grateful that he brought us together because he's been a wonderful friend and colleague now of
Oh,
mine. But having a show dog for the first time can be really intimidating. And as much as we love our dogs and want to experience the world with them, it's not always the easiest thing to navigate the conformation world. Because, in my opinion, as an outsider coming into it, it's one of those things where a lot of things don't make sense right off the bat. For example, the judges program, how to enter the shows, when you're supposed to be ring time. And I think a lot of that new can be really intimidating for first time owner handlers. So Vicki, before we kind of jump into all of this and give our first time owner handlers some tips, can you give everybody a basic overview of what a conformation dog show is and why our owner handlers might be interested in participating in it?
well, conformation is the sport that's actually looking at how the dog is built and constructed and how well that dog conforms to the AKC breed standard for that dog. So every breed club, the parent breed clubs, write standards, and that is a blueprint of the breed. It goes line by line. The head should look like this, the front should look like this, the rear should look like this. Some of them are very loose, some of them are more specific, but the idea of a dog show is that we're going in there saying, this is my breeding stock. Like, that's why they were started, was to have peers evaluate breeding stock of generally working dogs, but also companions, but that's how they were started. So that's what it's for. It's to look at how the dog is built and how he moves and how he stands there and how that construction looks and what he acts like. Does he act like his breed? That's important too.
It is important. And I think the cool thing about conformation, the American Kennel Club recently launched an owner handlers program, which is I really like that they have done that because I think it's encouraging more people to get involved in the sport of conformation, even if they
Absolutely.
have no desire of breeding their own dog. So
Right.
talk to us a little bit about some of the benefits that training for and attending these conformation events have.
Well, I think that one, it's good for dogs because if you do it right, they're learning to be relaxed and comfortable in an environment with other strange dogs and strange people. They get touched by strangers all over their body. They get looked at, but it's also like not so much with COVID, but before we were at dog shows a lot, like at least one weekend a month in California, so this is something my dogs do. They love going to the dog show. Are there some that don't love it and we have to work on it? Yeah. But I mean, generally, this is the thing we do together. I'm lucky to have a breed that loves, in general, people touching it and people meeting them. So, yeah, I think it's a really beneficial thing. Not only that, but it teaches people about their breed. Like, you're forced to go beyond just, oh, I think this dog is cute, or I like the way this dog looks, but why does that dog look that way? So it teaches you more about your breed, more than you maybe ever wanted to know, like the history of the breed and why they're built like that and why it's important that they have that shoulder layback we're looking for and why they need to have all the teeth in their head. So I think for those reasons, it can be really good. And also, I just think it's another dog sport, like some people love agility. I don't, I dabbled in it. It wasn't for me. Some people like obedience. I did that too. I do like obedience and I dabble in that, but this is my sport because I like showing the dogs and not so much in owner handler. In owner handler, there are people who breed their dogs and show their dogs, obviously. But there's also a whole lot of people who are sort of just getting started and learning about this whole thing. And so I think it brings together a community of people who are probably newer, or at least people who can feel like they are playing on a more level playing field. because
Yeah.
it's not pros, you know?
Yep. And I think that's huge because I think a lot of people look at it at the show. For example, whenever I talk to my in-laws about dog shows, they're always like, "Oh, like what's on TV on Thanksgiving?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're
Mhm.
like, "They just like trot around with the dogs, right?" And I'm like, "Well, it's a little more involved in that." And I think that a lot of people looking at it for the first time might not really realize how many different skills the dogs have to learn and how
Right.
many different skills the people have to learn. And as a owner handler coming into the ring, seeing all these people that have done this forever can be really intimidating. So I
Mhm.
do like that they've kind of separated the owner handlers because it gives you a chance to kind of make friends and meet some people that might be on more of a similar learning journey that you are.
Exactly. Exactly. And there's a whole separate owner handler group. So you also, if you're doing okay in owner handlers, you're getting your feet wet in the group where you
Mhm.
might not be getting your feet wet in, the regular groups yet.
Yep. I do find too that sometimes when you go into the owner handler group, the judges can be maybe a little bit more forgiving for you, so
Mhm.
it does give you that opportunity to be successful in that group ring and kind of build your own skill set,
Right.
understanding that a lot of them are still in that early learning phase.
Yeah, and frankly, I think the judges can be easier going. I mean, these judges, a lot of times, judges who are doing owner handler group are not necessarily approved for all those breeds or groups in the regular. So you might have, you could have judges who don't know as much as you might want them to know about a breed, but you also have judges who are probably a little bit more laid back about it. Um, and I sometimes think that, they find it really fun. I
Mhm.
think they like to do owner handler, like they like to do puppies.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that too. And if they give you a funny gating pattern that you've never done before, it's easier or a little less intimidating to go, "I'm sorry, what'd you say? Can you repeat that?"
Yeah,
I do find
exactly.
that energy level and that kind of communication is a little bit more laid back in those groups.
For sure.
So, for everybody tuning in, I see we've got a lot of viewers with us live. We will be answering questions as well. So, feel free as we're talking about something, feel free to drop that question into the comments. Or if you have a question related to you and your dog, again, feel free to drop that and we'll be sure to get to that. So, when we're looking at our owner handlers, there's a lot of things that they need to work on before they go to the ring,
Hmm.
including skills that they need to teach their dog, including human skills like how to wind up your show lead and where to place your hands, how to run
Yeah.
when you're gating with the dog, and also being in that environment. Giving yourself the skills that you'll need to keep yourself relaxed and keep yourself
Right.
focused so that you can be a good teammate for your dog. Because I know you help a lot of first time owner handlers like myself
Yeah.
when I got started with you, what do you find are the most challenging things for them when they're first getting started?
I think that the biggest thing is that it looks easy.
Hmm.
And so I think people get frustrated when they realize it's not. Professional handlers, a lot of them have been doing this since they were kids.
Yeah.
I've interviewed families that are on their third generation. So they've got the grandma showing the dog at the same show as her daughter and then her granddaughters. So a lot of them just this is what they've been doing. So if you're, a grown up who has a dog and has been watching dog shows on TV and loves Westminster and thinks this will be so great. I'm going to do this. I finally got a beautiful dog. But then they realize, oh my gosh, I have to learn how to present it. I think
Yeah.
that can be frustrated. I think people have to be patient with this and understand that not only are they learning a new skill set, but they're also training a dog in something that's new to them. So that's all that's a big shift. So I think that's can be tough. I think one thing that happens that's frustrating for owner handlers or hard for them is that they're getting advice from maybe their breeder and their peers in the breed and they've got all these different people, so sometimes it's hard for them to actually stick to their training plan and stick to what they plan to do. But basically the most important thing is for them to one, you know ideally start out with a good dog,
Hmm.
a dog that's good enough to be competitive with someone who might not be a super fantastic handler, because a
Right.
really great handler can make a mediocre dog look a lot better, and a not so good handler can make a good dog look not as good.
Mhm.
So they need to get a decent dog, and then they need to do the training. I mean, if you really put the time into training, then your dog is going to be able to go in there and do the job that you've trained them to do. So I think the most important things is for them to look at it, especially the first shows, maybe for the first year, as just like we're just learning about this. And the only goal is to have fun and to
Yeah.
feel like our team competed as a good, cohesive, working unit together, and that they put that out there. So I think that, make sure the training is good, make sure that they've done their homework about what they need to do to go in there, because the more prepared you are, the less stressed you're going to be. And
Mhm.
that goes for the dog too. To take a dog into an environment as overwhelming as a dog show and expect him to perform if he's not really truly prepared is asking a lot. And it sets everybody up for failure. The dog can hate dog shows. The people will be like, we never win, So I think that it's just important to do the best you can at preparing the dog, training the dog, and then going in there with the intent of having fun as you learn it. You
Yeah.
know, you have to enjoy this journey if you're going to do it. If your only goal is to go to dog shows to win, it's not the sport for you, because you won't always win. And I find it particularly hard for people who are used to a life where if you put the time in and the work in, it pays off no matter what. So there are people that are really, really successful in life, and then they have a hard time dealing with it because you can't control what's going to happen here. There's
Yeah.
a judge and they get to pick, and it ain't always going to be your dog, So
Yeah.
that can be a hard pill for new people to swallow.
Yeah. I love that concept of just going to have fun, because that's what my goal was every single time I went to a dog show.
Yeah.
I didn't have any big social plans. I didn't have any big agenda. I wasn't there to win. I was just there. And what I always told myself was, I looked at my dog and I said, hey, buddy, we're just here to have some fun. You want to go play? And that's what we
Hmm.
would do, is we would just enjoy the process and do our best. And by,
Yeah.
I think, taking that pressure off yourself as an owner handler is huge too, because obviously you've gotten a nice dog. There's trainers that are helping you. There's breeders that are likely helping you, other people in the breed. And you want to do well. You want to show that you can be there. But I
Yeah.
think if you spend your time and energy focusing on that, you're only going to psych yourself out. But if you
Hmm.
just look at it as, hey, this is a fun thing I'm going to do with my dog, it really does at least help me kind of take that edge off and just be there to have fun with my dog.
Absolutely.
And I love what you said too about putting in the work, because I think that generally people are good about doing their homework when they're in a structured training plan, but it's easy for us to forget that we are a new learner and the dog is a new learner. And so
Hmm.
all of the little mechanics that go into presenting a dog and showing a dog have to become muscle memory,
Hmm.
because when you get in that environment with all the dogs around, all the people around, the noises, the slick surfaces, there's so many other things there that are going to overwhelm you, that
Right.
if your mechanics aren't really solid and the dog's mechanics aren't solid, then that stress is going to come flooding in because you're going to be completely overwhelmed.
Yeah, and I feel like, you know, and I've said this a lot over the years, that this is a sport that's very, very deep set in tradition.
Mhm.
And so most of what people know and have learned has trickled down from their breeder, their mentor, their friends in the breed.
Mhm.
So the information they get is bits and pieces, which can be okay, but there's not always a really strong foundation. And you've got to have this whole piece. And I don't mean of how dog shows work. I'm talking about, and I'm not even talking about the structure of the dog.
Yeah.
I'm talking about putting together a training plan that actually teaches the dog to do these things.
Mhm.
Not that we just, once every few weeks put him on a leash and run him around and, say he's lead broke. But I mean to actually teach him how to put his feet in the right place, how to move, how to stop, how to look at a person, the
Mhm.
judge, how to do all these different things. And I do feel like, what I've tried to do is make all of that information be available in one spot, because sometimes people will get some of the stuff they need, but there's a whole other piece that's missing. And most conformation classes are what they call, handling class where
Right.
you just go in there and you practice as if you were at a dog show. So I am starting to see, and it's something I've been doing for years and trying to push people that I'm working with, trainers I'm working with, to offer more, skill classes, or just within your handling class, actually teach people stuff.
Yeah.
Like, don't just, say, okay, everybody line up, here we go. It's like, give them something to work on, and actually problem solve if there's issues. But if there's not issues, train them how to do it right.
Yeah. I think that's huge. And it makes so much sense from a training standpoint. I mean, if we think about any other sport that we do, dog powered sports, agility, rally obedience, there are specific skills that the dog has to learn and that we as handlers have to teach the dog so that we can go into the ring and do the job, right?
Right.
I mean, for rally, we have to teach a sit and a down, and those have to be in heel position. We have to teach heeling. We teach turns, jumps, right? And so we don't just walk into a rally ring and expect to be able to do all those things.
I don't know anybody in my life, and this is after, I've been competing in dog sports for over 30 years. I don't know one person who has shown up to an agility trial with an untrained dog and said, let's just see what happens.
Because nothing good would happen.
Right.
You can't do that.
And nothing good happens at a dog show a lot of the times if that dog goes in there and is not ready. Yeah. Either emotionally not ready, like he's afraid or over aroused or something, or not trained. Mm-hmm. Like, why would people think they're going to be competitive if the dog's not well trained?
Yeah.
There are good judges that can pick out a dog that's really poorly handled and that will have the guts to put up a dog that they can see as a good dog, and they've had their hands on it and they believe in it, despite really horrible handling. I've literally gone to a dog show and saw somebody show a dog that I had no feelings about, just like, okay. Yeah. But then the next day saw it with someone else and was like, oh, who's that? She wasn't here yesterday. I didn't see that bitch yesterday, in the ring. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, she was being handled by someone else. I get it. So it's, it's a legitimate thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I don't want is for people to get frustrated and then think immediately they need to get a handler. It's like, no, pay your dues, put the time in, learn how to do this. You're only going to get better if you work on it.
Yeah. And I think it's important for humans to learn new skills just as much as it is dogs. So yeah, it's certainly, you likely would be able to finish a dog faster if you take your puppy and you send it with a handler. But think of all of the wonderful benefits that they would then be missing out on, right? The training time with their owner, the human learning new skills so that they can be a better handler and trainer for their dog. Right. I mean, there are so many important things that owner handlers can learn from putting in the time to learn the skills themselves too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's talk about some of those skills, because I know that it's very broad and we could probably have a whole live just dedicated to that. Mm-hmm. But I think it's important to discuss that it's not just what we see in the ring. It's not just the exam, the gating, right? It's also the foundation work on socialization so that the dog is comfortable in that environment. And it's also the human mechanics of being able to not only do those things in the ring with your dog, but then also keep your dog entertained, keep your dog relaxed. So talk to us a little bit about how a program might be different for you if you had a younger dog, younger puppy, teenager, and you planned on doing conformation. Are there specific things that you focus on either with relationship or training or socialization to help that puppy be better adjusted for that job?
Well, I feel like, the worst time in the world to start building this stuff is when a dog's a teenager, right? Yeah. Ideally, I'm coming off of 8 weeks of baby puppies, 9 weeks tomorrow. And the amount of stuff that I put into them is incredible. And so 3 are off to their new homes. And I feel like they're well prepared for the world, right? Yeah. So I think, if you can start the earlier, the better. That's good. So hopefully there's already a good foundation on having started some training at home, even just impulse control training. Mm-hmm. The dog knows how to wait. The dog knows how to leave it. The dog knows how to actually take food properly from your hand, all those things, all this, the regular manner skills. being okay in new environments. You will, if you're in, usually go to dog shows at the same venue, but there are going to be different places. So the dog needs to be okay being in different locations. He needs to be okay around strangers. He needs to be okay riding in the car. There's nothing worse than getting to the dog show and then having to clean puke off, for,
Yeah.
for an hour before you show. And now you're showing a dog who's nauseated. I mean, so there's all of these different skills. If you're traveling, you're going to need to have your dog be able to sleep in a crate in a hotel room, and how to, there's just this whole laundry list of things. So I think, it's not really much different than I would prepare for a new pet dog that I wanted to take everywhere. I just want the dog to be, I know not all dogs are going to be bomb proof, but my goal is that this dog can just handle it, that the dog is just cool with stuff. Because honest to God, if the dog's really okay with everything, it's not that hard to fine tune all those behaviors. It gets really hard if you have a dog who's like worried or aggressive, or there's just some big behavioral thing. But if you've got a stable individual, train him to be a good dog. The one thing I would say is that we all know that dogs can learn sit, stand, down, blah, blah, blah. But the first thing that you teach is always going to be generally that dog's default behavior, meaning the behavior they throw at you if they don't know what else to do. So the one thing I do, especially with people who I know will not spend an equal amount of time teaching stand and sit, is I have them teach stand as the default. And then after they've got the dog just always standing in front of them, then we'll add down and then sit, and you know what I mean? Things like that. But I am all for dogs having to, puppies, adolescents being taught manners training, because all that's going to go a long way. I would also say it's really important that they get the dog used to a lot of gentle handling by you, because you are going to need to do things like open his mouth and move his legs and touch his tail. I mean, I've worked with dogs where you go to do the tail and they flinch and tuck, and we have to desensitize to that. So get them used to all of that body handling in a gentle way so that they're comfortable with all that. I would also say, a big thing is, depending on how much grooming there's going to be, that you get them used to that. Because there are some dogs that people actually want them to lie down on their sides on a grooming table and be brushed. Like that's a
big skill.
Yeah. Or how to put their head on a pillow. Like my dogs put their head on a pillow to get their top knots up. There's all these little things that are also dependent on your breed, right? I would also say that it's important that, they at least start figuring out a way of how they plan to keep this dog in condition for the ring. What's going to be, because I always say that you can't really do training until all of the dog's basic needs have been met. So we need to make sure he's getting enough exercise. All of that other stuff is mental stimulation, all of that. But he's got to be kept in condition if he's going to be a show dog. So I would say, are those enough extra pieces?
Those are a lot of extra pieces. And that doesn't even touch on what the human needs to do in terms of their own skills. I think that's important, though, because obviously for any dog, we want them to be able to go out in the world and be comfortable. We want them to be confident. The last thing I want is to go do a new thing with my dog and my dog's terrified of the environment. And so all of that starts early. I think the other big component of this is don't be in a rush. Right. A lot of people who have been showing for a very long time can get a dog show ready much faster than an owner handler can. But just because you're an owner handler doesn't mean that the dog should be in the ring sooner. And I think that there's sometimes a lot of pressure put on owner handlers. Oh, there's a local show, you need to get your dog out. Oh, you need to go support the numbers. But if your dog isn't ready, it is totally okay to say no. And I think that that's really important for people to hear, because like you said, those teenagers, if you're a first time owner handler and you're going to a show for the first time, teenage times might not be the time to do it, right? If you don't have all those foundations put in, it is better off to wait and get those foundations in so that you and your dog have a more positive experience.
Exactly. And I think that there is a lot of pressure. And one of the pressures is he's so pretty,
Mhm.
he's so pretty, you just got to get him in the ring. And it's like, no, he should be prettier as he gets older. And he's certainly,
Yeah.
if he's who they think he is, he should not fall apart. So, but I think, like you said, a lot of it is pressure for numbers. And I always tell people, you are your dog's advocate. You have no obligations to keep numbers for anybody, to enter dogs. I mean, I literally have heard people say, just put him in the ring, like we need him to be there. And it's like,
Mhm.
no, he's not ready. That's not right. And they're going to be doubly mad if that dog gets excused and then doesn't count,
Yeah.
or the owners have to ask to be excused and he doesn't count,
Mhm.
So yeah, it's like, that's probably the biggest thing in this sport, is to being able to have the thick skin to be able to stand up for yourself and your dog and just say, this is how we're doing it.
Mhm.
I mean, I've literally had professional trainer one time who was at a show, who thinks she knew what to expect and that she could handle it. Before she could even blink, they had pulled off the collar and put a choke collar on the dog. And she had no intention of using that. And it's like, but she didn't even believe it could happen like that. And I had warned her, so you have to be able to say, yes, I'm going to do this, no, I'm not going to do this. And you don't have to be mean to people, but you just have to be like, we're not doing it.
Yeah.
I have a puppy right now that's being reactive. He's 7 months old. He's entered on a dog show on the 20th of this month. When I saw this happening 2 weeks ago, I called his breeder and said, he's probably not going to be at that dog show. She said, well, do you think he could come and visit? Absolutely. I actually love that idea. And if I really like where he's at, I might put him in to get a baseline. I'll dress for it. But my plan is, no, I'm not going to
Yeah.
ask him to do something that will make him uncomfortable. Period. End of report.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky that I have a breeder who's being supportive, because many aren't.
Mhm.
Many aren't.
Yep. I think that hits home for me quite a bit. I'm in a breed that is generally handled a little bit tougher, and I'm only using positive reinforcement techniques with them. I wasn't going to put them on a choke. I wasn't going to correct them. And so there's a lot of advice given. And I think it's really important as an owner handler to know what you're comfortable with and know what you want to do with your dog,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of have those conversations with yourself in advance, so that when it comes up, you're able to stick up for yourself and stick up for your dog, and know that there is a support community there.
Right.
I think that can be hard to find too for first time owner handlers, if
Mm-hmm.
their only connection is a few people that they know locally. you know
Absolutely.
if that support community doesn't use techniques that they're comfortable with, know that you have a great Facebook group, Positive Training for Show Dogs, that I linked to here in the
Yep.
description. So your community doesn't have to just be local. You can also find a community to support you, outside of that.
Right, for sure. And outside of your breed, like that
Mhm.
was a big thing for me. I did kind of leave my breed, my first breed, which is Dachshunds, for a while, because I was just I just needed to step away, not from the dogs, not ever from the dogs. It was from the group of people. It got, when you've got clubs fighting and just a lot of issues with people, I stepped away. And when I sort of went back, I did it in a way that was more like with my students.
Mhm.
So we had a community of a lot of different breeds that all supported each other. And that was really powerful. We had other dogs to root on. We could stay for group and then have other dogs to cheer on, and have just different people to be around than your breed. So I think, and that's kind of one thing I'm trying to figure out, how to create more of a community for people to find each other
Yeah.
within, our, this group, so that we can, go to dog shows and not just feel like you're floating around by yourself,
Yeah.
and what you're doing doesn't look like anything else. What
Yeah.
people don't understand is a lot of the things that are advice that's given to new people, if even from handlers sometimes, is management.
Mhm.
If somebody's saying, well, you can't deal with that dog, so you need to use a choke collar. Well, that's a management thing. That's not training. You could also go home and actually work on training the dog. So,
Yeah.
it's just a different mindset than a lot of people have.
Yeah. One other thing that you brought up that I think I'd like to hit on again for first time owner handlers is, let's say we've signed up for a show and we go and the first day is a disaster. There's a lot of pressure to keep showing your dog if you've entered, but sometimes we have to make that decision that we need to scratch for the rest of the weekend because whatever reason the dog isn't feeling well, they aren't showing well, they're getting stressed out, and we need to go home and put more foundations on the dog before they're ready to come back into that environment. How do you navigate that personally? Are there certain people that you talk to? How do you recommend that your clients make that decision? And then who do they communicate that to?
Well, first, if there's any behavior issue or potential issue going in, then we look at it like a baseline. When we look at it like we're just going to see how he does or what happens. So, with the plan that if it doesn't go well, we're not going to stay for the other days. Sometimes we actually want to see what happens the next day,
Yeah.
if so it could be, a partial, shit show, but as long as, see, to me, the thing is protecting the animal. So if it was horrible, like one time, I'll tell you what happened one time. I was at a dog show, and a favorite dog client of mine who was a Doberman, who was young, right as they're getting ready to go in the ring, his owner twists her ankle. And then I don't know why the friend couldn't do it. So it's just me standing there. And I told this, young, athletic, beautiful handler friend of mine, who was actually a student, you show him. And she says, I have thongs on. I can't. Well, I had on boots and leggings. It was not good. I took this dog in the ring, and it's like, also, I'm like the dog's fun auntie, right? Because he's my student in my class. And so it's all play with me. So we go in there and it wasn't pretty. Stacking was beautiful, but I'm, dumpy and fat and show little dogs. I don't run with Dobermans. But you know what? He didn't care. He had fun. He had a great time. He didn't even look embarrassing. I looked embarrassing. The movement wasn't pretty, but his stacks were beautiful and he didn't care. So absolutely he should go in the ring the next day, even though we were a hot mess that day. Right. But if he had melted down, or if he freaked out or got afraid, that's the time when it's really like, we need to stop, because this is not more important than the dog. And this is not more important than my relationship with my dog. Yeah. And if you take a dog in the ring who's worried or afraid and you say, too bad, you're going to do this, you're fracturing that relationship. You are not having your dog's back in that instance. If my dog looks at me and says, I need help, I'm not going to say, too bad. I wouldn't do that to my husband. I wouldn't do that to you. I wouldn't do it to a friend. I wouldn't do it to anybody. I'm not going to do it to my dog. If they're needing help, they're going to get help from me. Yep. So, I think that you have to determine if it was just bad because like the dog was goofy and you were embarrassed and maybe you went to the wrong place in line or something, then absolutely show the next day. Yeah. But if it was a bad meltdown, if you feel like you cannot go in there and hold it together for your dog emotionally, or if the dog was worried, then I would say pull him.
Yeah, because making them just suffer through that one incident is only going to do more harm than good, not only to that relationship, but to how the dog views that environment. And that's Absolutely. Not a training issue that's going to be fixed by showing the dog the next day. In fact, that will likely do more harm.
And a lot of people, in this dog show world, have said to me, because I know this for a fact, because they told me they believe that desensitization, desensitizing is just doing something over and over. They don't understand that, no, this is actually like a process that the dog gets to drive. Yeah. And the behavior gets to drive. It's not just, it's essentially flooding, but they're thinking it's something else where they're, just forcing the dog. So yeah, I want progress, to be honest. It's not okay with me for a dog just to knock it off and learn how to be a robot when someone tells him to. I want to make sure that I am teaching him to feel comfortable with something I'm asking him to do. And I don't care how big he is, and I don't care how tough of a working breed it is, any dog can be worried or sensitive.
Yep. Yeah. And I think there can be a lot of pressure to feeling like you're letting someone down if you don't show. But at the end of the day, it's important for everybody to realize that you have to be your dog's advocate, and you have to be there to say, he's not okay with this. We need more time at home. And not just letting the dog be overwhelmed and flooded in that type of situation. But depending on the situation, it doesn't necessarily mean we have to pack up and head home. If the dog was comfortable in the environment, you certainly could work on settle on a mat and crating and time up on the table for grooming in that environment. It really just depends. But there are certainly ways that we could still make the most of the weekend without putting the dog in the ring and overwhelming them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will say that, it does get more challenging now with COVID. I don't know how much people can hang around at dog shows and stuff. Right. And honestly, just to not, ruffle everyone's feathers, I probably would not go hang out at ringside with a dog I pulled from competition.
Yeah.
Because that's sort of very inflammatory. Like, that'll make people crazy. Yeah. You just go do your own thing, and because I don't want to alienate people from their breed and the people in their breed. I don't want to have them do things that are like going to, cause real upsets, but I want them to, be able to do what's best for the dog at the same time.
Yeah. Yep. The dog has to come first. And that's with anything we do, any event we're bringing them to.
And the thing is that people who tell you to do bad things to dogs, it's not that they would never admit that they don't put the dog first. They think they do. They also just think the dog is fine. That's the problem, is that they probably love their dogs too, but they think you're not doing anything mean if you just make him do it. He's not hurting him. Literally, the judge is not hurting him. He's just going to touch him. But, if that scares you, the dentist is not going to hurt me either usually, but it doesn't change my anxiety about going in there. So it's the animal who has to, feel comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and start going over some of the questions that we have here. So for everyone watching, if you guys have a question, feel free to drop that into the comments and we will do our best to get to it. So the first one we have here is from Elise, and she has a French Bulldog and she's having trouble showing the bite. So do you have any tips for her on that?
Well, you do the thumb exam with that. This is not a French Bulldog, and you do not do this with a Shiba. But basically, I think the key is getting your hand underneath so that when you do the thumb exam, this hand is not, you're not obstructing the view from the judge. So if you can learn to come under with your right hand and then keep your left hand on this side so that you can just lift those lips, that's really all they want to see on a Frenchie. Boop, is the front. Practice that.
Yeah. And set your phone up, Elise, if you can. Video footage is really helpful so that you can go back. So set your table up in front of a bookshelf, place your phone on the bookshelf and hit record so that you can then go back and look at how you're doing. Because a lot of the times looking at video footage will help us pick up on a lot of things that we're doing well or things we could be doing better.
And that will give you the judge's view.
Yes, absolutely. So then you know what you're really showing to the judge. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so we've got a question here from Judith, and she's concerned because she feels that a lot of professional handlers also say that they're breeders, owners, and handlers, saying that they show in owner handler. So for our newbies, can you kind of explain what the owner handler ring is and what qualifies someone as being a professional handler?
Well, a professional handler is somebody who takes money or something for handling dogs for people. And if you're a professional handler, you're not allowed to compete in owner handler. Now, I'm about to do an interview soon. I just have to set it up with them, with some owner handlers who've actually won best in shows. I mean, they are that good, but they're owner handlers. They're not professional handlers. They show their own dogs and they show them really well. And they've been doing it for a long time. So you might say, well, they're practically a professional. Well, that's too bad, because they're not. And that's that's just the thing about this sport. There's not a lot of sports where professionals compete with amateurs, and we do in this sport. So I think that, you know, professional handlers who brag that they're you know, breeder owner handlers, you just got to let it go, because there isn't anything you can do about it. It's annoying maybe, but what I always just try and encourage everybody to do is just try and get better, level the playing field by being a better handler so that you can out handle them, or at
Yeah.
least hold your, you know, hold yourself to that level, at least as good as they are, not
Yeah.
better.
Yep.
We should be better. We have a dog to show.
Yeah.
Or
One
a couple
dog
dogs to show.
that we
One
can
dog to
spend a bunch of
show,
time.
one dog to train, one dog to dress for, one dog to prepare, one dog to groom. There's absolutely no reason, except for experience and level of dedication, you know, why we shouldn't be able to be better.
Yep. We've got a question here from Luann. Can you show a spayed or neutered dog?
Not in AKC. I do believe that UKC has a spayed or neutered class. And sometimes you can at a specialty in veterans. So a lot of times the veterans classes at a, like specialty or national, will allow for an altered dog. But generally no, because they were originally, you know, designed to judge our breeding stock.
Yep. Got a question here from Laura. She will be showing her first show next month. Any tips or any etiquette tips for a total newbie?
Yes, I would say give the dog in front of you plenty of space. Be polite in the ring with your food or bait if you're using it, and toys. I wouldn't want to be squeaking toys or rattling things around or getting your dog fired up when another dog is being examined and needs to be kind of calm. I would say for a baby puppy, it should be all about fun, all about fun. So take a lot of cookies in there. Don't expect too much. Judges are generally much more easygoing with baby dogs, with puppies. So yeah, have fun. Be polite. Be ready. So get there in plenty of time. Have your armband and know when you need to be in the ring, and you know, be polite when you're in there.
Yep. The other thing I'll say for gating, if you are in the front of the line, it's always good etiquette to turn around to the person behind you and ask if they're ready, if the judge is going to send everybody around together as a group. So if you're in the front of the line, just be prepared to turn around and ask the person behind if they're ready.
Yeah, that's good. I forgot about that.
Okay, have a question here from Sandra. Good morning. Can you touch a little bit about the entry forms? I find the systems different in the States. She lives in Canada, and it's almost a secret conspiracy to find out what shows are going on. So talk to us a little bit about how to find events and how to kind of navigate those entry forms.
Well, most of the time, I personally look for events on InfoDog because MBF is who usually does the shows in my area. But the AKC website, which isn't always the easiest to navigate, does have a, you know, you can do event searches on there, and you would just need to put in like the state and the type of event, and then it'll bring up a list for you. We actually have a video on our YouTube channel on how to read entry forms. But basically,
for everyone watching, I have included that in the description for this video, so you can take a look at that.
Yeah, so that's on there, and that'll actually go through step by step. But basically, you know, they want to know all the information about the dog and then what class you're signing up for. So I'm not sure if it's a question about classes or if it's a question about the actual form, because there are, you know, rules in which class you're going to enter. And I'm getting ready to do a video on classes soon.
Oh, perfect. We'll be sure to share that. We'll be sure to share that. And we've got a great question here, which I think will apply to a lot of people. So she got her dog in 2020. Then we, of course, had this pandemic lockdown. And now it looks like there won't be shows for this foreseeable future. Is it too late?
No, absolutely not. I feel like there are, you know, there are just different people and different ways of doing things. There are a lot of people who are so gung-ho and excited when they get a new puppy, and when he's 6 months old, he's going to be in the ring. And I know people who let them grow up until they're 2, and then they finish them in a couple weekends, so absolutely not. I mean, I recently had somebody before the COVID happened that brought a dog to class, and he was like 5. And he was so lovely and so calm and so just easygoing. And I thought, wow, what of a breed that's usually pretty exuberant. And I thought, what a great time for him to start his career,
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's not at all too late because he's 1, right? You got him in 2020. Now he's about to be 1. No, even if he doesn't get in the ring before he's 2 or 3, no, you're all good. Totally not too late. There's not a too late, you could show them. There's a too early, you can't show them before a certain time, but there's no too late. And sometimes the thing is that that's when you might want to get creative with classes, because if you are going into it brand new and you're not sure what you're doing, and then stepping right into the open class might be intimidating. But maybe you do amateur or handler, or maybe you do American bred. There's other classes that you can kind of ease into that are not as competitive as open.
Yep. I think the one thing too to hit on there about he hasn't been around anyone without a mask. I think being without a mask might even be easier than with a mask. And it's just one more piece of the puzzle that we have to work on with training. The same foundation skills apply. At an older age, certain things might be easier, certain things might be harder, but it's still the same process that we have to start at from square one of building the dog up to be able to do all of those skills.
Yeah.
This is a great question. I know you'll love this one. Is it okay to teach a puppy obedience when we're going to show conformation?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have to live with this dog more than he has to be a show dog, right? So I feel like absolutely. If you're new and it's going to be a struggle for you, then I would teach stand as your default, so that behavior first. But then absolutely, I would teach obedience. I mean, this puppy needs to know how to live in the world and have life skills. So for me, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a saying that I heard quite a bit when I was first getting involved in conformation was, don't do any sort of rally or obedience until after the dog has finished, because otherwise you won't be able to get the dog to stand. And I love the quote from Karen Pryor that all behavior is modifiable. Remember that behavior can be taught. So just because your dog knows how to sit for rally doesn't mean they won't be able to stand for conformation, right? It's a behavior that we put on cue. We know when to ask it verbally or visually. And then remember too that the different context of the ring will help give your dog insight, different equipment.
Right.
Right.
And if you look at the higher levels of obedience, I mean, they do a stand stay. Yeah. They do automatic. They do a lot of stuff. And I personally have gone in the same day with multiple dogs to the obedience or rally ring and into the show ring and had the dog qualify and place in both. Yep. So qualify in obedience or rally and win in the show ring. So it's absolutely doable.
Yep.
There was a comment, I think, and you might bring it up, where somebody talked about having food in the ring. So I think we should hit that one if you see it come up.
Perfect. I'll definitely hit that one.
Yeah.
This is a nice one. Having trouble, feeling good about moving the dog or gating the dog, but having trouble working on that foot placement.
Mm-hmm. Well, it says, I have no idea how to do that. So I'm going to refer you probably to my stacking class or a private session, but basically, or just our Facebook page, because there's a lot of videos. When you stack a dog, ideally you want his front legs coming straight down so that they're not like this or like this. You want him to where the front legs come right down so that they're coming underneath his body. And then you want his hocks straight up and down as they can be. So that's a big thing. And I love that you asked that, because a lot of times people, they just watch handlers and then they'll move the dog's legs just because they think they need to do something with the leg, but don't move it unless you have an intention of what you're going to do with it. In other words, don't just grab a leg and it's like, I got to put legs somewhere. It's like, no, maybe the legs are where they should be, or maybe you need to reposition and put things, you know what I mean, where they need to be. So you just, part of that is working and practicing. I use stacking boxes a lot so that once you have a stacking box set, and so it makes it a little bit easier for you to practice placing the foot where it needs to go.
Yep. Yeah, I think too, video footage can be really helpful, or mirrors, because sometimes depending on how big the dog is, if you're looking down on them, sometimes it can be hard to figure out exactly where that foot placement is and where
even
it
with
should
table
be.
dogs. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of your videos, Vicki, you did a live about how to stack a dog. So I did actually link to that in the description, and that's a really nice place for you to start. And then I would definitely recommend reaching out to Vicki for some private work. She has a mentor program that is really great. And of course, when getting our dogs ready, we also need to get ourselves ready. So she covers not only the dog mechanics of it, but also the human mechanics, which are super important. Here's a nice one from Deborah Price. How do you know when you and your dog are ready for the ring?
Oh, I love that. When your dog is comfortable with novel environments, when your dog is comfortable around other dogs, when your dog is comfortable with people touching him, strangers touching him, when your dog knows how to do the behaviors, and when you're ready to advocate. So if all of those things are a go, meaning you're ready to stand up for yourself and your dog has all this under his belt, that's when I think you're ready.
Awesome.
Now, I like it if the dog looks good, I mean, if the dog's physically ready. But if it's a puppy, I don't care too much. I mean, my first breed is Dachshunds, and they can go from looking fabulous when they're, under 2 to it's like they look like a noodle by the time the show comes, and you're just like, oh man, who are you? So I think that, I'm less worried about the dog looking perfect as I am for everybody feeling perfect.
Yeah. All those little pieces to be in place. Yeah. Here's an interesting question for you. I know you love your junior handlers, and junior handlers are definitely a big piece in us continuing the sport and developing a bigger audience for it. So what do we do if we might have a dog that's mismatched in temperament and energy level to our junior handler?
Well, if the kid is actually doing juniors, meaning not just a kid showing in breed. So there's like, I have a girl who's 14, about to be 14, who got a dog from me a couple years ago. She did all the training, all the grooming, and finished her dog. And she had originally wanted to do juniors, but then she decided she didn't want to do juniors. She just wanted to show them in the breed ring. So there's a difference there. And I do think in a lot of ways, the juniors ring is very competitive. It is a whole different ball game. I think that it is incredibly important that if a kid and a dog are going to do juniors, that they're not mismatched. So I would probably be looking for a different dog. And if the kid's in the juniors ring, not in the breed ring, then you can find people who will add a name to, the dog, because the kid has to be listed as an owner. But you can probably find somebody who will, and it's not necessarily even a dog who has to live in your house. Sometimes it's just, this is going to be your dog to show. So I would find another one if it's really not a good match. And maybe even a different breed. It doesn't necessarily have to be the breed, because, I know people who grew up in dogs and they are still breeders and still owner handlers, but in a different breed than they grew up with, because that was their parents' breed, so now they have theirs.
Yep. I think this is the question you were mentioning about the food. Does this look familiar, Vicki? So we're having trouble with the French Bulldog standing on the table for exam. She gets so excited when the judge approaches. I tried offering really tasty treats just while on the table to help, so that she can focus on meat only.
Well, there was one question that said something like, or comment of, I tell people not to bring food into the ring with puppies. Oh. And what I wanted to say was, part of what we're doing when we're using food is building an association. It's not just for baiting. And so I have to talk, I mean, every conformation person there is, maybe not, but most call it bait when we're doing anything to do with food. But bait is different than reinforcement.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're interchangeable. And sometimes baiting is just to get focus, expression, doing something you wanted to do at the judge, getting ears. Whereas reinforcement, food as reinforcement, is reinforcing behaviors that we want the dog to learn and be good at. And I want to reinforce the dog in the ring. I don't want to reinforce the dog everywhere else. I mean, that's the beauty of conformation. I can feed him in the ring. I can't do that in obedience. I can't do that in rally. I can't do that in agility. But for God's sakes, let me give him a cookie in the ring. I'm trying to build a positive association. And the more sensitive or primitive or dogs that sort of aren't naturally, like my Lauchens, they're offended if people don't touch them. This is a breed that's in your face, glommed onto strangers. I don't need to bring food in the ring to build that association. These babies, they already care more about people than food. That's who they are. But my dachshunds, heck yeah. I'm gonna take that overwhelming, crazy desire for food and not attach that to the show ring. No way. I'm absolutely gonna do that. I'm just gonna be appropriate about it. And I'm knowing what I'm doing with it. With the Frenchie puppy, who it sounds like, can you go back to that Frenchie question? It was, because it said, please help at the end.
Get so excited when the judge approaches. I tried offering really tasty treats just while on the table so that she can focus on me, but sounds like maybe it's not working. Overexcited Frenchie wanting to move as the judge approaches.
Okay, so I do use a little bit of punishment for that. But it's not the punishment where you do something to the dog. It's the punishment where you take something away. So when you're practicing, what I'm going to teach the dog is someone won't touch you unless you're still. And you might have to start out with that person coming from the front so you don't get the head turn and then the Frenchie wiggle all crazy. And what you do is you start to have the person approach, and if the dog moves, they stop or they move away. And then at times they're going to have to come flying in really fast to reinforce if the dog held still for just a moment. But that's what we want to teach, Renee. We want to teach the dog that if you are still, that's how people touch you. And you could take this out in the world. If you teach your dog that you don't get to say hi to a person until you have your head, until you're like able to stop and pause and not be vibrating or jumping, that's the first step. That's a self-control thing. So I would be working on a lot of self-control behaviors, but I also would start working on that where it's just like, oh, I'm sorry. It's just like you would do if you were teaching the dog not to jump on people on walks. He wouldn't get access to people until he could think about it.
And I think that's a great point to bring up, because I would imagine that this excited to greet people behavior is also happening when we're outside on walks.
Exactly.
And remember that all of your training is related. So if you're having impulse control with overexcitement, or impulse control problems, I should say, with overexcitement greeting the judge, then remember that all of your experiences on leash when you're greeting neighbors or friends, that's all reinforcing that same behavior. So make sure that you're really evaluating, what do I want the dog to do? And that might mean that we're temporarily not greeting a bunch of friends and neighbors. Or if we are, we're using it as a training session to really work on that stillness and focus.
Exactly.
I want to talk real quickly too about the food concept that came up, because I was also told that when I was first getting started was to watch how much food you're giving. And I think that it's appropriate to bring up the concept of luring a dog. So when we are luring a behavior, luring is often a behavior or a training technique that we use to get a dog to do something, where we put a piece of food in front of their nose, guide them into the behavior. And that food, if it's not taken out of the picture too, quick enough, will become part of that cue. The dog will need that food in order to do the skill. But remember that ideally, when we're going into the show ring, we're not using a ton of luring, right? We've taught those behaviors to the dog, so the dog knows what they should do. And then we're just using that food as reinforcement. So it's not a bribe. It's thanking the dog for doing what we've asked them to do, in addition to building that positive association with the environment that you were talking about.
And I would also say that especially if you want a dog to have a career beyond a championship. So you want to do bigger things, even just if that thing is competing further an owner handler. This is my thing, all dogs to learn how to do a free stack with the owner standing in front of them. So I want them to learn how to be completely still as I'm breaking up pieces of food and handing it to them. So sometimes that means I'll put them, I'll use a stacking box, but if you've got an ottoman, you can put your Frenchie on and you stand in front of it. And it's just like, you just start reinforcing stillness. And Show Dog Prep School, we have videos on that, just go to our Facebook page and put in stays or something. I mean, we've got a ton of stuff in there. All of this stuff that we can cover in the mentor program too. So think about that for anybody who really needs some help.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because I know that there are quite a few handling classes that we talked about earlier, but there aren't a lot of places that strictly use positive reinforcement. And I think that for somebody who's just getting started in the sport that knows they want to do positive reinforcement, it's really important for them to get connected with a positive trainer right off the bat, especially if you're still learning the mechanics yourself, because it can be hard to walk into a class that uses different techniques and figure out on your own how to do that with different methods.
Right.
So I know that I've linked to a few of your videos and your Facebook page where people can connect to you. But talk to us about your mentor program, because I think that for owner handlers, I think this is a fantastic way for them to not only find that positive community that we were talking about, but also get one-on-one attention from you on how to work with their dogs. So can you explain what your mentor program is?
Sure. So the mentor program it started out as sort of like let me know when I can help you. And it morphed into this really strong community, because over the last year, it's really become a huge focus on Show Dog Prep School, because when you have a business, you sort of figure out what people want. And we have the online courses, and those are great, but people need more help than that. They want, I think, consistency and just more ongoing. And so the mentor program is our Facebook group, which is just for mentor program members, but we do a ton of stuff in there. Like tonight, we're going to talk about keeping busybody dogs, like, I don't even remember how I put it,
like mentally engaged.
Yeah, mentally engaged at ringside and in the ring. So that's something that's just free. I mean, people who are in the mentor program can just tune in, and we do a Zoom and everybody chats, and we do classes like that. We usually do 2 things a week. I went through this whole litter with this puppies with my mentor program. They saw some of the puppies being born every step of the way. They've been there. I did a puppy grading for them the other night. So it's a community of people who are all different levels of learning and all different levels, but I would say most are fairly beginner. There's professional trainers in there who are really skilled trainers, but their expertise is not so much in conformation. So they're working on that and just getting more skilled with their teaching of this sport. And it's $39.95 a month. It's also $389 a year. So it used to be just yearly, but now it's monthly. So people can, and I've actually had people say, I need to take a couple months off. This is going on. And then they jump back on. So that's what it is. It's meant to be a community of people. It's a safe place. They can bring anything they want to the group. And if somebody has an issue or wants to work on something, we work on it. I just make it happen. We have a lot of guest speakers. I had a friend recently who was a professional handler assistant, came in and did a grooming Q&A. Laura Reeves from Pure Dog Talk, she's going to do one, I think, in May, because someone came to me and said, hey, can you look at this ad? What do you think about this? Hey, maybe you could have a talk on ads. And I'm like, oh, great. I'll get Laura Reeves. She's a professional handler. So she's going to do a talk on how to create a good ad, what that means. And so there's a lot of different guest stuff that happens. And frequently I have people messaging me from the dog show saying, oh my gosh, this is happening, or sending me pictures. And I'm okay with that. It's that kind of relationship. I think anybody who's just getting started, I think anybody who has a dog, but maybe their breeder's far away, maybe there are a lot of breeders who are they do say that they'll help you, and they will, but they're not going to like be talking to you twice a week on a Zoom.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that kind of, I'm going to help you. So I think it just can be, beneficial to have that community.
Yeah, I'm in it. I have certainly enjoyed my time in it, being able to learn from others and experience others and watch their journey. And you do a really nice job of nurturing that, which I think is really important for those owner handlers. They need that. I don't want to say hand holding, but they need that guidance, and like you said earlier, there's not one thing where you can say, here, read this, you'll learn everything you need to know.
No.
Your book is probably the closest thing to that, but outside of that, there isn't a lot. And so I think it's really nice for owner handlers who are coming in to have a safe place to be able to ask all those questions.
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
maybe they don't want to post on their main Facebook page and kind of get those, you don't know that, we want that learning to be safe and comfortable for them. So
and it's not allowed to not be nice in there. You know what I mean? Like,
part of the rules.
It's a supportive environment, like, truly.
Yeah.
So,
well, for everyone watching, I'll be sure to include the links to everything that we discussed. So I'll add a couple more into the description for you guys. This will be available to watch on YouTube later today. So if you're just catching on to the tail end, you'll be able to get all caught up. I'll post that link here as well. And then guys, please reach out to Vicki. She's an incredible resource. And if you're having trouble being that first-time owner handler, I know that she'll help get you there. So Vicki, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a really great talk.
Thank you for having me.